In this special 4-year anniversary episode of the No Gray Areas podcast, I sit down with our very own founder, Joe Gagliano, the man behind the largest point-shaving scandal that we know of in sports history. From the high-stakes world of trading to a phone call that changed his life forever, Joe shares how a risky decision at 22 years old led to a federal investigation, national headlines, and ultimately a lifelong lesson on integrity. You've seen the headlines, now hear the whole story from the mastermind himself, Joe Gagliano. Let's dive in. Joe Gagliano, welcome back to No Gray Areas, your podcast. So it's great to have you on here. We wanted to have you back on because it's been a little while, but when this drops, it'll actually be 4 years from the very first podcast. Isn't that crazy? And you were the first guest. And so we wanted to have you back on. Our audience has actually grown a bunch. Even the people that heard your story and really why we do this podcast and why the book that you wrote and the movie that we're doing. Some people heard that 4 years ago, but our audience has grown a lot. And there's a lot that haven't heard it. Even those that did probably forgot a lot of it. So we wanted to go through that again. But man, Joe, it's been kind of fun to see how this has grown, hasn't it? Because I think by the time this drops, we'll have over 130 episodes we've done. We've gone from a few thousand subscribers on YouTube to probably 300,000 plus by the time this drops. So seen a lot of growth, a lot of impact, and I know that's one of the reasons you wanted to do it. But to go back and start getting your story, let me set it up this way.
Well, let me chime in for 1 second, though, because, when you guys asked me to come back on here a couple weeks ago, and yesterday I was thinking about the story, and I was thinking about some things, and I went back and I watched that first episode we did almost 4 years ago. Yeah. It's like I didn't have all the gray hair I have now, and I don't know if that's because of you. And
I have more gray hair too, so it might be mutual.
But
on my beard.
Man, it's crazy how far we've come with this channel and the purpose behind it, and so flippin' proud of what you've done. I throw compliments around like manhole covers.
I do.
And I think I told you a couple weeks ago, I was watching one episode that you did recently, and I go back and forth between Patrick, Bet David, and Joe Rogan, and then I watch ours, obviously, with No Gray Areas. But it's really cool to see how far you've evolved as well as the face of the franchise, so to speak, and the face of the podcast and the messaging and how you interact with people and the questions. So that's been great to see. And obviously what Riley's been doing behind the scenes on the production side and what Peyton does on the marketing side, you guys have really blown up the channel. The production quality is amazing.
Yeah.
The messaging's incredible. I do feel like we're making a change.
Yeah.
Some of the comments and some of the feedback we get is meaningful.
Yeah.
It comforts when we look at the bottom line of a podcast and we see how much we're burning on an annual basis to actually know that there's a purpose for it. Yeah. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe. That means a lot. But you bring up something that I think is so important for our audience to understand, because making a difference is the very first time I met you. When you reached out to me and we went to lunch that time, you talked about that. And then I've heard you say that so often. That's kind of a key thing for you, isn't it, is to make a difference?
It is. And you know what, Pat, I've never actually asked you, do you think we're making a difference?
Absolutely.
It's we've been doing the podcast now it's coming up on 4 years. And obviously, you've been involved in the foundation, and you're involved in what we're doing in the business side as well. Sometimes we get so lost in the noise, and whether we're getting punched in the gut on a daily basis with something that didn't go as we planned, or something that does go well, and the deal gets done successfully, and we just forget about it because that's what we thought we were going to do, and we really don't enjoy the minor victories is what you always tell me to do all the time.
Yeah.
And, if I kick it back to you, do you think we're actually making a difference?
Oh, 100%. I get the privilege of sometimes showing up in a coffee shop around town or dropping into a place, and I'll run into someone that said, like, hey, I listened to the podcast. And, most people won't ever write and tell you this stuff.
Yeah.
So you don't get to hear. It's kind of like a speaker on a stage. Maybe there's 1,000 people in the audience. You don't get to hear how that might have impacted them. But I get to run into some people, and they'll start talking about like how it impacted them or what they said. Or I always remember that one podcast we had about the first responder, and that organization he has, and that there was a first responder that reached out to him, and he shared it with us. And it was amazing how this guy, was kind of at his rope's end. And because he listened to the podcast and that particular episode, was going to reach out and get some help. So we know there's those kind of stories out there, and there's a lot more that we don't
It's the
hear
little
about.
things like that that actually fill my cup and keep pushing to keep things moving forward. It's like a round of golf, and my game is probably like your game.
It's better than my game, promise you.
Non-existent, right? But you could play 17 bad holes and just rip up the course and stink up the course, I should say, and then you hit one good shot on 18, then you want to go back the next day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing.
Keeps you going.
It's the same thing with the podcast.
Yeah.
We don't have any negative comments. I mean, I don't think people go out and spew negativity with what we're doing, but people don't really go out and say nice things either.
Yeah.
But every now and then when you do get something positive, it fills your cup and keeps you going forward.
Yep. And you're right, it's perfect analogy with golf. You could be just stinking it up, but you hit that one and you just get it perfect, and it goes straight, and it's down and it makes you come back.
Yeah.
And you're right. So audience, send us some good comments every once in a while. Tell us how it's impacting you, because it was really your vision. It was your vision. It's one of the reasons you wrote the book. It's one of the reasons that we're making a movie. It's one of the reasons that we did this podcast, is to make a difference, to take your story, which we're going to get into in a second, to take your story and use it for good. And we're seeing that. I think we're going to see it even more so in the coming years, as our audience is about to hear. But let me back up and start this to retell your story a little bit, which is a fascinating, amazing story. We actually just got the script this last week of the movie, that they're a rewrite of it. And, it's going to be so good. But the reason is because it's a great story.
Yeah.
And it's a story of failure. It's a story of mistakes. It's a story of playing in no gray areas. It's a story of redemption. But let me back up for our audience now and start it by asking you this. How big of a bag do you need to fit $5 million in? Now, some of our audience that don't know your story are going, why are you starting there? You're going to hear, audience.
Yeah,
so
it's funny. You've always been intrigued by that. And really,
because I've never had a bag with $5 million in it, Joe.
Yeah, so bigger size duffel bag, but it didn't all fit in there. So I did have a backpack with me as well.
Wait, that makes it even better. So you had a duffel bag full of cash and a backpack.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that until right now. That's great.
Yeah, I didn't really write about the duffel bag in the book. They say about $1 million weighs about 20 pounds in actual physical weight. So you look at $5 million, obviously would be 100 pounds. It's a lot of weight to be towing around. But
you're carrying 100 pounds of cash.
Yeah. So, but it definitely can fit. I think I maybe got $3.5, maybe $4 million inside of the duffel bag itself, and the rest just thrown inside of a backpack, and jumped on a plane and called it a day.
So you went through security with this?
Well, TSA back in the 90s, this was 94?
Yeah.
TSA wasn't nearly what it is today.
Yeah.
I think they were still
pre-9/11.
I think they were still smoking on airplanes at that point. And
yeah. And you'd go right up to the gate to meet people. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was nothing like it is today. And I don't even think you had to take off your shoes or any other nonsense that they make you do now. But
did they look in the bag though?
Sure. Yeah. They looked in the bag. And, I distinctly remember the TSA agent looking at me, looking at the bag, looking at me again. And I said, man, I'm going to Vegas. Or I just came back from Vegas, and either one. And there's nothing they can do. It's certainly not illegal. It's just paper.
Yeah.
Bringing it outside the country would be another issue. But keeping it domestically inside the States wasn't a problem.
Yeah, it's such a great story because, again, the very first time I met you, I didn't know you at all, right?
Yeah.
And you reached out to me because I was speaking at a place a church that you would attend. And so you reached out, and it was a bigger church. And so we meet for lunch, and you brought your book, and you kind of tell your story. And I've told you this many times, but you're telling me parts of the story where I'm sitting there going like, okay, internally I'm thinking like, whatever. Like, you can't fit $5 million in a duffel bag because you said that to me. I went out in the parking lot, I opened up my computer, and I Googled you, and I start looking into it, and I start going like, this really happened.
Yeah.
This story really happened. And so, audience, again, you're going to hear this story now. And when this movie comes out, and we hope you get the book, No Gray Areas, and read it. It is an amazing story. But so, again, let me back up now. I call these hinge moments in life, or inciting incidents. If you watch a movie, in the first few minutes of a movie, there's an inciting incident. and what launches the character on a quest or a journey. Like their life will never be the same. So in Braveheart, his wife is killed, launches him on a quest. His journey's going to be the same. In Finding Nemo, Nemo's mom is killed and he's captured.
You went from Braveheart to Finding Nemo.
To Finding Nemo. I was trying to cover the gamut for our audience.
Did a good job.
The best
with that.
movie ever made in a kids movie. But you had your inciting incident or your hinge moment. One of them was when you took a phone call at 23 years old about a fix.
Gosh, it's what is that? 93, and we're in 2025 right now. Is 32 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I still hear that voice in my head. It's weird too. My brother went to school at Arizona State, and I was trading bond futures at the Chicago Board of Trade. I dropped out of college at the age of 21, went right to the Board of Trade, started clerking for a very successful independent bond trader down there. And Pat, it was legalized theft. It's crazy how
what you saw in the pit.
Oh gosh. Well, the bond market's the most expensive market there is to trade. And, millions and tens of millions are moving every minute down there.
Yeah.
And you've got guys that are absolutely destroying it. You've got corporates, you've got institutions, you've got, so there's a lot of things that as a young, impressionable kid that grew up as a son of a police officer in Chicago that, we had some organized crime in our family with the same name as Gagliano, but we never went down that road.
You guys weren't doing that.
My father said, you better run the other direction or you better forget that you have a father if you ever think about doing that nonsense, right?
So your dad taught you integrity and good morals.
Definitely.
And
Definitely. Would not tolerate. And that's why it's so internally, it's a challenge for me to know that I violated the integrity and compromised myself, completely contradicting and disobeying the lessons that my parents taught us growing up.
Joe, especially your dad is the most important person in your life.
So here I am, soon to be 57, just beating myself up whenever I start thinking about the story and I start thinking about the journey of my life, about how I allowed myself to be that weak and how I allowed myself to compromise my integrity despite all the blessings that I had at a young age. I mean, Pat, we've had people on the podcast and you know people and I know people that would have given anything they could to have a family structure the way I had it. I mean, we had a great family. My parents were married 52 years. My dad just passed back in 2017. Aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces. We had a great family values, great family principles. We weren't wealthy. We were lower to middle class type of thing, but we had structure. We had structure. And, I had every chance in the world for education. I had people I can go to lean on for advice, for good mentorship. And I still allowed myself to compromise my integrity at the age of 23. And I always say, when I really play this thing back and I go on my walks and I think about different things in my life, it always stems from being a product of that environment. And I say the environment being the Board of Trade. Because when I went down there at the age of 21, I mean, it was in awe, basically. It had everything that I could possibly imagine as that would intrigue me. I mean, risk to reward, fast-paced action, crazy dollars behind it, because we're all motivated by money. People that say, money doesn't really, we're all motivated to have some sort of success for ourselves and for our families. And so, I think being a product of that environment, after about a year and a half or 2 years down on the trading floor, when that phone call that you just referenced came in, I was already, in my mind, in the gray area.
Yeah, you had been playing in the gray area for a year or two then.
Yeah, because, and Pat, I know I've said this to you before, and when someone says honest, ethical, successful trader,
Yeah.
It's
It's an oxymoron.
It's the biggest oxymoron you could possibly come up with.
Yeah.
Because there is no honest, ethical, successful trader.
See, Joe, I didn't know that until you explained it to me, like what went on down there and everything and how the games that are played and
Oh my
how
gosh.
unethical it is.
The retail versus the wholesale market, in retail being you sitting at home behind your computer and saying, hey, I'm going to go to E-Trade and I'm going to buy a bond. Okay, good. You see a bid, you see an ask. I don't know if people really understand what the market makers do. When you see a bid and when you see an ask and you see that price differential, 2, 3, 4%, whatever it may be, but that's how much they're taking advantage of you up front. Back then it was different because you didn't have live computer trades. Back then with idiots like me that were inside the pit and a retail order came in, we would charge 10, 20, $40 to trade that paper. Now you're doing it online for, you're getting real-time execution at a price point that you've actually wanted to make that trade at, and they're charging you next to nothing to do it because there are no more traders making trades.
Yeah,
Everyth's
yeah.
computerized now.
Yeah.
But back then it was literally, as I said before, it was legalized theft.
Yeah.
And so that was the environment that I played in, Pat. And that was, when I started trading my own account and I started trading night bonds, I mean, I had the guy on my left side who traded retail paper for Prudential Beige. I had the guy on my left side who traded the bond paper for Bank of China. I mean, if I couldn't make money between those two guys, I probably needed to replace
job.
myself at that
Yeah,
point or find
yeah.
a different career.
Yeah.
But it was literally legalized theft because all I would do is watch the market. I knew where they had to buy, what their buy points were, and turn around and beat them and sell right back to them. So that's why when that phone call came in, when I started trading with X amount of money in the account and then 90, 120, 180 days later, you just see this account continually growing digits behind it. At the age of 22, 23 years old, you feel invincible.
So if you don't mind me asking, so you basically grew up middle class, right? Like it would be a middle class family in Chicago. Your dad's a police officer, like you said. And then you're 21, you drop out of school and you start working here and you start dabbling in gray areas. But you went from a middle class kid to what, like numbers now, you're talking what?
It's stupid dollars, Pat. I mean, at that point, what is this, 30, 32, 33 years ago? I mean, I remember at one point in my trading account had over $10 million in it.
Wow.
I mean,
you're
32 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, or I'd walk on
in your early 20s.
21, 22. Well, 22 is when I started trading. But you look at the other nuances behind it. Like I'd walk on a trading floor with $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 in cash, and I'd walk off either with 2x or 3x, or I'd walk off broke. Just not because I bought anything, because I'd play liar's poker all day with the other traders when the markets were slow and wouldn't think anything about it if you lost money or if you won money. And still to this day,
So you might have gone in there with $5,000 in your pocket, and at the end of the day, you walk out with zero or $15,000.
Sure.
But that was just a normal day for you.
It was just, you have to become a really good loser if you're in the markets. You have to understand how to handle losses, but more importantly, you have to understand how to mitigate your losses.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you're wrong, you just have to say, you know what, I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wrong. So if you apply that to anything that deals with in the financial space,
Yeah.
I think it'll be a benefit for
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
overall
for sure.
the overall way you view things. Because I knew when I made a trade, I knew 30 to 35% of the trades that I make would be losers. But I also know that 70 to 60, 65 to 70% of the trades that I make were going to be winners. So the difference is if you're on a losing trade and you know it's a losing trade, get the heck out of it. Don't try to vindicate yourself saying, okay, gosh, I bought something at 20 and it's now down to 18. I don't want to take a loss. Well, you better take a loss because when it goes to 10 and you lost 50% of your value, then you're really going to be hoping that you would have sold out at 18. So if you're wrong, you're wrong. Just mitigate your losses and move on.
Do you think that were you kind of wired that way just naturally, or do you think you learned that at that stage, or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, definitely learned that at the board, and definitely learned strategies to mitigate losses, to allow wins to actually become larger wins. Those were different traits that I picked up on, and it's the same thing is applied to anything in life that I'm doing, whether it's real estate development, whether it's sports betting still, whatever it may be, you could apply those same principles to it as well. And I still bet sports, and I'm still out there doing some things, and I don't really sweat the losses. What bothers, because the wins and the losses the dollars that go behind the wins and losses, I don't think twice about. I focus on more of validating my own decisions, which is so wrong the way normal people would look at it. They're looking, okay, how much money did you win? Okay, that's not my focus. I'm focused on what's my winning percentage.
You're more excited the fact that you picked it right. Doesn't really matter that you got some money out of it, but you picked it right.
Validating my own decision. And I remember one of the oddest things that I've made some stupid big boy bets in my life, right? And we could talk about those if you want to, but one of my favorite sports to bet is baseball, right? Because nothing beats you in baseball. Just all you got to do is pick a winner. You're not going to get into lane run lines. You're not going to get into all that totals in baseball and all that other craziness. But it's like I like to be right when I'm sports gambling, right? It not so much in the market, but I really like when I analyze a betting card for the day. It takes me, depending on how big the card is. If it's a Saturday, it'd take me probably 6 hours. I mean, it's a lot of work, right? But I remember one thing about 2 years ago, I was in the Colorado Rockies were playing really well for some reason, and they were at home, and they were putting up a whole bunch of runs every game, and the total was 11.5 or 12, which is a big, big number for a baseball game, right? And I said, I love this game. These guys are going to score like 20 runs on their own, right? And I bet the game. I bet it pretty large, too. And the game ended up 1-0. 1-0. And I'm saying, God, I couldn't be more wrong than that. And that still, to this day, bothers me. I mean, I can't even tell you how many tens of thousands of games I bet over my life, but
that one stands out.
That one game really stands out because I wasn't even close.
It wasn't about what you lost. It wasn't about the money you lost. It was more about that you were wrong.
Yeah,
that's what bugs you.
I don't care. I don't care if I lose a game by a half a point or by a run because at least I knew my decision-making process was almost spot on. But when you lose a game by 1-0 when you think it's going to go over 12, I mean, it just kind of messed me up a little bit.
It was kind of fun. We were on that business trip in Nashville that time. And remember, there was the hockey game you were going to go to. And there was the first, you kind of let me inside of your world in your head and what you were planning. And so we were sitting there in the hotel room and you're kind of telling me how you do to make decisions on this and what you're doing. And then you're kind of asking my opinion, which you've never asked since. And there was a reason you haven't asked since because I was kind of learning what you were doing. And then I was so sure. I mean, I was looking at what you were looking at, and I'm like, I knew we had
You were trying to get a hold of your wife and seeing how much money we could bet you were going to go to the –
We were walking to the game, and I was like, maybe I should call Shar and see. But we lost, and
it's not we lost, Pat. You lost.
Yes. But I have noticed that you've never asked my opinion since then.
Well,
In fact, you have asked my opinion.
When I'm stuck, I go to your opinion to find out what not to do.
Yes, exactly.
That's the greatest thing to do. And
in fact, recently there was a game, right? And when I told you who I thought it was going to be, and you don't even tell me your bets really necessarily anymore, but you
it was a Super Bowl recently.
Yes, yeah. And I said, like, here's who I think's going to win, and here's what. And I saw a little concern on your face, and I found out later it's because you'd already laid down your bet, and it was what I was going with. So you thought you were probably going to lose.
Well, what do they say? The sun shines on a dog's ass once a year, too.
That was my once a year.
You got a little lucky there, but it's all good, though. It's just for clarity, when you look at a game, when you bet a game, there's a lot of exotics you can bet inside the game, player props and all that other nonsense. I don't even look at that stuff, but you could either bet on one of the two teams that are playing each other, or you could bet the over or the under, right? Well, you were 0 for 2 on that hockey game.
Yes.
And you analyzed the heck out of it. You were
Yes.
looking. I was so proud of you, though, looking at stats, looking at everything.
Yeah.
And then we go to the game, and
I analyzed it so much that I was so confident. But
yeah, it didn't work out
Yeah.
well. So that's just not your forte.
But I was
Ben.
pretty confident in the Super Bowl. My pick in the Super Bowl, I was right. So I'm 1 for 2 in my two choices. But Joe, so going back, so we're back at this phone call that you get, and to help the audience get it, you're working, like you gave the background. So you're in the Board of Trade. You're there. You've been dealing in gray areas now for a while. So give us the background. You get this phone call. Your brother's going to school at ASU. You're in Chicago, and you've been betting games some with them. That's where this phone call comes. So carry the story from there.
Yeah, so I
Hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode so far. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss a future podcast. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
I had left the Board of Trade a little bit here on vacations to go spend a couple days or weekends with my brother at ASU, and I was not married at that time, and my brother always put me up on a quasi pedestal, and I had a few bucks at the board, and these kids were all starving college students. So when I went out there, I made sure that we all had a good time. And one of the kids that my brother knew of, I don't necessarily say he hung around with him, but he certainly knew him. This kid, Benny Silman, was a bookmaker on campus at ASU.
Mm-hmm.
I opened up an account with Benny, and I started betting with Benny for 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it was. And I just, not in a braggadocious way at all, but I just myrtleated him. I mean, just destroyed him, destroyed him. Not because of anything, but because you have to understand, this is 1993. Technology, it wasn't like you had a cell phone that had live stream dating, a live stream numbers coming through there, what the betting lines were and how changes were made or injury reports. I mean, you were at the mercy of whatever feeds that you were at and making sure those feeds were coming through correctly. And so, and plus Benny's clientele were a bunch of college students. So they weren't really sharp on numbers.
Yeah.
So you get the kids at ASU that maybe lived in Philadelphia or Chicago or New York, and those kids,
They're betting with their hearts.
they're bet with their hearts. They're going to bet on the Bulls. They're going to bet on the Bears.
Yeah.
They're going to bet on the Eagles, the Giants, the Jets. And so they're not really caring what the actual true betting lines are that the odds makers are posting. So Benny would take those betting lines that he probably pulled out of a newspaper back then in 1993, and he would take the marquee teams in these big cities, and knowing how his clientele would more than likely bet, let's say the Bears were playing and the Bears were 3-point favorites.
Yeah.
He'd bump them up to maybe a 6-point favorite because he knew that no matter what the number was, his betting clientele, which were 20-year-old kids, were going to bet the Bears. So he really played that game. What he didn't plan on was having someone like me that understood value in numbers to go in there and just destroy him. I mean, and I'll give Benny credit because Benny always did the right thing with me. And I beat him hard a couple times. A betting weeks would go from a Monday to a Sunday. I mean, there were weeks, 40, 50, 60, 100 grand. And I would just pound on him. And so during that,
he's having to pay you.
yeah, he's having to pay me. Where he got it,
50
I don't
grand, 100 grand. Yeah.
Where he got it, I don't know. But he always did the right thing with me. And over the course of a few months, him and I just kind of built a relationship. And we just talk a little more on the phone when I called. And then, fast forward to January of 1994, he calls me out of the blue. I'm at home in Lincoln Park in Chicago. And I was like doing something else. I don't know what it was. And he said, hey.
And this is the phone call we talked about.
This is the phone call,
Yep.
yeah. And he says, Joe, I got a fix. And Pat, it just didn't register to me.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, oh, okay, that's cool, right? He said, no, Joe, I got a fix. He said it again. And I'm like, what? And it's still not registering because I just wasn't thinking along those lines. And finally, he spells it out. I remember distinctly hearing him spell out F-I-X. I said, really? Tell me more. And that's when he told me about Headache Smith, Steven is my friend. Headache's my nemesis.
Yeah.
Told me about Headache and told me, I didn't. He said, hey, have you ever heard of Headache Smith? I said, no. He said the guy's an absolute basketball stud. He leads the NCAA in minutes played, free throw percentages, defensive MVP. He is the ASU team. I said, okay. And he said he's into me for some money. He's into me for about $10,000 and doesn't have a way to pay it. And I can get him to fix games. So that's kind of how the whole thing started.
Well, and I know in your book you talk about it. I've heard you say it several times. It's in the movie script, which is going to be a powerful scene. But if you would have just hung up the phone, how much different things would – because that's why I call it one of the inciting incidents in your life, or a hinge moment in your life. Because you didn't hang up the phone and you carried on the conversation and you went through with this whole thing. Your life is – completely different. I mean, that launched you on a quest, on a journey. So,
Pat, I don't think there's a day or a week that has gone by where I just don't think about if I would have just had the intestinal fortitude to just say no. No. But then again, can I blame myself? And I go through the whole litany of thoughts where I was raised so much better than that. So I should have said no. But then I go through the thoughts where when he called me, I was at the Board of Trade for 2 years at that point.
Yeah.
I have seen all this excess and success on the trading floor, and I wanted that. Okay, so how do I get it quicker? Instant gratification type of thing?
Yeah.
But if I just would have said no, oh my gosh, what my life would have been different at that point.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Well, and because you didn't say no then, you end up working with Steven Headache Smith in a sense, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but you end up fixing 5 games?
No, we fixed 4 total.
4.
There was 4 total, and that old adage that greed kills.
Because originally it was just going to be the one game.
No, originally it was supposed to be 2.
2 games.
It was
2 games.
Oregon State and Oregon.
Yes.
So back up a little bit on the call with Benny, when Benny mentioned the fix and tells me about Headache, and I was, like I said, I didn't have the courage to say no. So instead of saying yes, I kind of split the baby, so to speak, and said, okay, let me talk to this guy. I want to talk to this Headache guy. So he set up the call, and I remember talking to Headache, and because Benny gave a preface to Headache that his sports book was backed by organized crime in Chicago. So Benny kind of teed this whole thing up with Headache saying, hey, you don't owe me this $10,000, Headache. You owe the mob in Chicago, and here, I'm going to put you on the phone with the guy, and you're going to work out this deal with him.
And you have the perfect name, right? Gagliano?
Yeah. So it's Headache didn't know. Here I am, a 23-year-old kid talking to a 20-year-old kid. He doesn't know who I am.
Yep.
He has no idea that I'm just as nervous about this call as he may be talking to me. But
he's thinking you're with, because Benny set it up, he's thinking you're with the mob.
He's thinking I'm someone that he needs to pay.
Yeah.
I disagree with some of the assertions of the quote-unquote mob, but people have their own thoughts, and that it is what it is. And it's not something myself or my family have ever been involved with.
Yeah.
But he's thinking on the phone with me that I'm someone that he needs to respect and pay.
Yeah.
No idea that I'm just a 23-year-old kid, trading bonds at the Board of Trade and you don't owe me a penny type of thing. But he distinctly said on that call, and it was a quick, short call. He said, I'll give you 2 games. I'll give you 2 games. And I worked out a deal with him for $50,000. I'd pay him $50,000 a game, and I'd remove or relieve the debt that he owed to Benny. And he said, I'll give you 2 games. And he said, but I won't lose. I said, man, I don't need you to lose.
Yeah.
I just make sure you don't win by more than I tell you.
So, and now from his perspective, so he owes $10,000 to Benny. He thinks there's maybe organized crime behind it. So not only is he going to fix 2 games with you, but he's not going to have to lose. He's going to pay off his debt, and he's going to make, for him at that time, being a poor kid from Dallas,
Like $100,000.
Yeah, he's going to make $100,000 between these, which was probably felt like $5 million in your duffel bag.
It's a massive win for him. Yeah.
So that was from his perspective.
Yeah.
From your perspective, then you're going to do this because, like you said, instant gratification.
Because
you can lay down money and know the winner.
I know the intricacies of the sports betting world because I've got a few bucks in cash that I could throw at this thing, and I've got a lot of bookmaker relationships, and I'm just thinking, okay, it's going to cost me $50,000 a game. How much can I make?
And when you say throw a little money at it, you said I could throw some money at it. How much money did you throw at the first game?
Well, the first game, I brought to Vegas with me $500,000, and then I had a bunch of sports bookmaker connections in Chicago and New Orleans and on the East Coast, and probably about 14, maybe 15 different accounts that I probably was able to lay off a little north of 200,000, maybe 200. I'd say no more than 250, right?
And,
250.
And Joe, isn't this right? In the Netflix documentary, which is great. Again, audience, if you haven't watched it, Bad Sport, you got to go to that. And it's, I think, the third highest or most watched sports documentary on Netflix,
the
right?
third highest ranked sports documentary in Netflix history behind Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, that Athlete A, that horrific pedophile from Michigan State with the U.S. gymnastics, a women's team.
Yeah.
And then ours is the third.
Yeah. But I don't think they brought that up. Like, I think they actually talk about game one, and they talk about you having put in $500,000 on it. But that's just what you brought to Vegas. You actually put another $200,000 or something, like you're saying, on the East Coast. So, so you put down about $700,000, $750,000.
About $700,000 out in that game total. But getting back to when you talked to, what would you call it, about a hinge moment? Is that what?
Yeah.
So the hinge moment, when you talk about the call with Benny, right? I'll go back to there's two examples for this hinge moment that really come to mind. Was that call with Benny where he says fix and tries to educate me what a fix is, and I'm completely oblivious and clueless on that. But then the second thing was the day of the game. When I talked to Headache that day, we identified two games, and it was Oregon State and Oregon. Between ASU and between U of A, University of Arizona. At that point, they were all on the side of the Pac-10. Now I think it's the Pac-12, or even if it changed again, I'm not really sure. I can't keep track of all these conference changes anymore. But at that point, teams from Oregon State and Oregon would come to Arizona, and they would play on a Thursday and on a Saturday, and they'd flip-flop with University of Arizona. So we had Oregon State on a Thursday game, and then you had Oregon on a Saturday game. So those were the two games that ASU was playing at home. And ASU had a pretty good team that 93-94 season. Mm-hmm. They had a pretty good team, and the Oregon teams were not really all that strong. And so I knew that Arizona State would be a double-digit favorite at home. So when I set this up with Headache probably a week in advance, looking at the schedule, I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. Oregon State and Oregon, Thursday, Saturday. And he said, great, I'll give you two games, and then I'm out. So that whole week, I start planning. I go to the bank, I pull out cash, I get everything ready, I book my trip to Vegas. I'm going to fly out there on a Thursday morning. So I'm all teed up Wednesday night. I got my duffel bag with cash inside of it. Everything's good. I'm flying out on like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, Chicago time. I'm going to get to Vegas like 9, 10 o'clock Vegas time. I'm going to bet the game. The game starts at 7 o'clock. I wake up that morning, and the limo driver is going to pick me up in Chicago. And there was a snowstorm and an ice storm that you could not believe in January in Chicago, right? And so the limo comes, picks me up.
And he's got to get to Vegas because you got to lay down the $500,000.
Without that, everything's done at that point. So the limo's like half hour, 45 minutes late, and then we're in the car and we're driving at a snail's pace because there's ice all over the roads, and it's just a miserable Chicago winter day, right? I finally get to the airport, and for those of us that are old enough to know the O.J. Simpson Hertz commercials when he's running through the airport, that was kind of me. I had a duffel bag with $500,000 over my shoulder, and I'm trying to get to the gate to make this flight. And I get to the gate, and it says, flight's delayed. And I go to the counter. I say, how long is this delayed? She goes, I don't know. We've got ice. They're trying to de-ice planes. They're trying to get planes in, all this stuff. 2, maybe 3 hours. So, okay. Now, I go to a payphone because we don't have cell phones back then. I go to a payphone and I call my parents. Now, my parents had moved to Las Vegas in 1990. So they've been out there about 3 years. And, my father, God bless him, was clueless with sports gambling. I mean, he just liked to watch the Cubs, liked to watch the Bears, and would watch a Super Bowl or the World Series type of thing, but no idea what sports betting at all. And anytime I brought it up, it's like I was talking to a wall pretty much. He just didn't want to know about it, didn't have any gamble in him. And so I remember, you talk about a hinged moment again. Well, the first one was when Benny tells me that I didn't have the intestinal fortitude to actually say no, tells me about the fix. The second moment was when I'm at the airport and I get to the gate and the flight's delayed 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it was, and I go to the payphone and I call my parents and wake my dad up. I never forget my mom answering the phone because my mom got up early. My dad always used to sleep in a little bit. And my mom answering the phone and yelling for my dad, Joey's on the phone, right? And so he gets up. He said, "Hey, Joey, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, Dad." And I'm trying to tell him all this stuff in a quick little phone call. I said, "Hey, I'm coming to Vegas." Oh, I said, "Oh, great. We'll go to dinner." I said, "Dad, I don't have time for that. I need you to go to the bank. I'm at the airport. I've got cash with me. I want to bet a game that starts at 7 o'clock. My flight's delayed because there's ice storms and snowstorms here in Chicago. I need you to go to the bank and pull out everything you have." He said, "What?" It's like I wish, when you talk about a hinge moment.
Yeah.
If I would have said no to Benny, okay, that would have been a step in the right direction because I knew right from wrong.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that. And then if my dad or my mom would have never answered the phone that day.
It's so interesting that both of your hinge moments are these phone calls. Like one, if you would have just hung up, and the other one, if they just wouldn't have answered, the trajectory of your life might have looked differently.
Or, I beat myself up when I say this, Pat, because, okay, I could say, what if my mom or dad didn't answer that phone that day? What if they were on vacation? What if they just didn't hear the phone because they were up in age or whatever it was? Or what if they did answer the phone, which they did, obviously, and my dad would have said, "No way am I doing this. Get your ass home. Forget about this nonsense. Forget about this."
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay. Now, in a weird way, in a weird circle of life thing, here I am, 57, a whole bunch of gray hair and feeling like I'm 90, trying to parent our 4 kids, 3 of which are married already. I carry that lesson and those thoughts with me with how I conduct myself with my kids. Like, I know my youngest is our son, Mateo.
Yeah.
And he's turning 17 here in a little bit. And I want to be his friend. But I can't be his friend and his parent at the same time.
Yeah, especially at
where
that
if he
age.
ever, and I think about it, if he ever called me and said, "Hey, Dad, I got this going on." Now, okay, my mind goes to some pretty weird places, and I can think outside the box probably better than most people. But knowing how I viewed what my dad did to me by saying, "Are you flipping crazy? I'm not doing that nonsense. Hang up the phone on me," and I wish he would have done, because my life would have completely been polar opposite than what it's been for the last 30 years. And I carry that through to my kids now in how I try to be a barometer to my kids and my family, and making sure that they don't have the opportunity on my watch to accept mediocrity or to compromise their integrity.
Yeah. Man, Joe, that's we could unpack that one for quite a while. That's a whole
It is.
parenting.
Those are 2 things that I have, I don't want to say regrets over, because there's not a thing about my 50 years that I had with my dad that I would change. But I just look at it from a parental standpoint.
Yeah.
I wish that would have been different, but it wasn't.
And what you were asking him to do is you needed him to go lay down these bets, right? Because you weren't going to get there in time. You didn't have the money. So you were asking him. He and a couple of buddies end up going out. And these bets that you were making in his first game, they all had to be under 10,000, right? At each
So really, I was really aware. I don't know how I became aware of this at the age of 23, but I was really aware of being under the radar, not being noticed, not drawing attention, not moving the betting line, Because if you understand what, in theory, a sports book is, say the Bears are playing the Packers, and you're a sports book.
Yeah.
You can care less if the Bears – you should care less if the Bears win or if the Packers win. You don't care.
I'm going to make money either way.
All you care about being a sports book is collecting 10% for having an opinion.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's called the VIG. So sports books charge 10%, and they charge you 10% to have an opinion. So at the end of the day – if the sportsbook has $10 million on the Bears and $10 million on the Packers, they don't care who wins. They just made $1 million.
Yeah.
They're completely agnostic as to what the final score is. That's how sportsbooks work. And so it was the same thing when you look at this, the thought process here of how we were going to try to stay under the radar is anything under $10,000 in cash doesn't have to report a CTR, which is a currency transaction report. So we would go bet, my dad and I, excuse me, and a couple other of my dad's friends, I gave them each money, and we probably used 30-some hotels out there back in 1993, 94. And we would go to different hotels betting in $9,900 interval.
You're trying to get rid of $500,000 in $10,000
on a Thursday night Pac-10 basketball game.
Yeah.
That's pretty much meaningless. But here was the beauty of how this happened. This was a Thursday night game against Oregon State and a Saturday game against Oregon. So the Thursday night game in Vegas, I had to move. I bet like $500,000 in cash and did everything with the bookmakers, and that's fine. That really wasn't that hard to do because Sunday was Super Bowl Sunday. So you had all the excitement in Las Vegas. At that point, you had 1994, you had the Dallas Cowboys playing the Buffalo Bills. So you had a lot of money in Vegas. And so when you're trying to bet $500,000 on a meaningless game, most of the time there would be issues. But being Super Bowl weekend and being such an influx of money and cash out there in Vegas, it was actually
fell at a perfect time.
It was pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
And so the day of that game, ended up betting the $500,000. Arizona's line was right around 11.5 or 12. ASU's line was minus 11.5 or 12. I had talked to Headache earlier that day. And so we had an arrangement. Headache and I had an arrangement. And I intentionally say Headache because Headache was like I said earlier, the nemesis, the villain. I look at Steven as my friend. Yes. Right? Yeah. And you and I both.
And he says the same thing, right? He's like, Steven was one personality and Headache was another personality. Yeah. He was living at Headache at this point in his life.
He was in Headache. He was the baller on campus, and he was Headache. That was his persona. So I had set up an arrangement to call Headache that day, right after the shoot-around. So they did their shoot-around in the morning.
But I just want to interrupt really quick because of what you just said. I don't want the audience to miss this when you were saying that Headache's your friend or whatever. He's your friend now. At that time, you didn't really know him. You've had a phone call with him where he thought maybe you were part of organized crime or something. You weren't, but that's why he's kind of nervous. And then you're doing a couple of phone calls telling him what you wanted the number to be, right? But that's really all you guys are doing with each other. You don't know each other.
No, at that point, I was playing the character as this organized crime heavy guy in Chicago that really was going to threaten him and, hey, you better do what you need to do here to handle your business the right way and make sure it comes out. The outcome is going to come out as we need it to. That was the role that I was playing, and we had set up a call that day to talk, and I was going to let him know what the number was. Now, I knew we were betting that line was right around 11.5 or 12. So ASU minus 11.5 or 12. What we were doing, because ASU was favored, you don't want to bet the favorite. You want to bet the underdog.
Yeah.
So I want to bet Oregon State plus the 11.5 or 12. That means Oregon State can win the game, and hey, that's great. Or if Oregon State loses the game, just don't lose by more than 12 or 11.5 or 11, because you can't win the game by half a point. You know that as well as I do. So as long as Oregon State loses, but not more than 11, I'm still going to cash the tickets. So when I called Headache that day, and I actually called him from the airport right after their shoot-around, right before I got on the plane, I said, and I knew that bet.
After your dad's call?
Yeah.
So you made the call to your dad, and now
Yeah.
you pick up the phone and you're calling Steven.
Well, it was a couple hours. I wanted to, because I ideally wanted to get to Vegas first.
Okay.
And then see where the betting lines were,
Yeah.
make sure I knew where we were going to lay the money off. But literally, I had no time for that because. So I tried to see when this flight was going to take off, and then finally they gave clearance on the flight. Probably I think it was taking off around noon or 11 or noon, right around there. And that's when I called Headache because I knew his shoot around was going to get done that day, and I was going to talk to him. So what happened was I got him on the phone and I said, "Hey, the number's 6. You need to win by no more than 6."
So you gave yourself a little buffer.
Yeah. So I knew that. I knew I was going to be able. I felt pretty comfortable. I didn't make a bet yet. I was relying on my dad and his friends to do what they had to do. I gave them as best as I could clear and concise instructions. And I felt pretty comfortable that, hey, even if we mess up a little bit, even if they draw some attention, maybe we bet the line down to 9. Okay. But if I told Headache the number 6, I'm still going to build in a cushion for myself.
Yep.
So I told him the number was 6. Well, it turns out we never even really moved the line. The line never went. I don't think we bet a ticket sub 11.
Yeah.
So we were betting the game, Oregon State plus 11, plus 11.5, plus 12. So those were the bulk of the tickets on that 500,000.
Yeah.
Everything with the bookmakers, I got 11.5 or 12 with the bookmakers, so that wasn't a problem. So for me to give the number to 6 to 7 was really just to build in a cushion because I figured there's no way. There's 9 other players on the court, all Division I players.
Yeah.
They all got game.
This is the part of the story that just blows my mind.
They all got game. They're all talented athletes.
Yep.
There's no way one guy is going to be able to dictate this score to make it land on 6. Now, I say one guy because there actually was another guy.
Yeah.
They had
he roped in
the
something.
other guard, Isaac Burton, Ice Burton.
Did you know that he had roped him in, or
I did.
Okay,
I
okay,
did.
okay.
Headache had told me about that on the first call.
Yeah, okay.
Because I questioned him on it, and I said, "Hey, man, I know you got skills. I know you're talented, but I'm worried you're not going to be able to carry this load, and you're not going to be able to dictate how this game's going to go." He said, "I play the entire game." He said, Coach Frieder doesn't take me out. I play when I want to play, and I dictate the floor. But, hey, I could bring the other guard in as well. Yeah. So when he said he could bring the other guard in at that point, Pat, it's like, okay, now it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Because you've got, arguably the point guard, you've got the shooting guard, you've got probably 40 to 45% of the offense with those 2 players. Okay, I'll take those odds.
But so when you tell him 6, if they win by 7, 8, 9, 10, you're still going to win your money.
I'm still going to get paid.
Yeah, you're still going to get paid, but you built in a buffer. And did you think he could get it right on 6?
Never.
Yeah,
Never in my wildest
because that's what blows my mind, because the game ends and it's
I think the final score was, 82 to 76, something like that.
Yeah.
And
it was 6
to
points
be
on that.
82 points in a basketball game divided by 2, you're talking, 40 some odd baskets, right? To have 40 some odd baskets and to be able to make sure that you only win by 6, it's
incredible. He pulled that off.
You talk about 3-point field goals, you talk about free throws.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even remotely think he could make that happen. And so my dad and I ended up getting to Vegas probably around 2:00, maybe 3:00. And my dad picks me up at the airport. They had bet some of the games. They had bet maybe 70, 80,000 worth of the game. So I had to get the rest of it off myself. And I ended up getting the rest of it off. I ended up catching a break. There was a casino called Little Caesars that probably very, very few people are going to remember. It was right where the Paris Hotel is right now. It was owned by a East Coast bookmaker by the name of Gene Mayday. And Gene, his mantra was, if you can bring it, I'll take it. That was his old school guy, right?
So you got to drop some extra on this?
So I went in there and I think I got about 200,000 off with Little Caesars and Gene. I walked in there and I said, "Hey, I want Oregon State tonight." He said, "How much?" I said, "What can you take?" He said, "What do you got?"
Wow.
So I think I got a little north of 200,000 off with Gene that day at Little Caesars, and which made the rest. I think my dad and his friends already had like 80 off. And so it wasn't that hard to get the rest of it off by that time. We got all of it off probably right around by 5:30. And then it was odd because at that point, we had all the tickets, and I organized all the tickets in envelopes according to the casinos that were used. And we sat in the sports book at the Bally Sports Book. My dad, myself, and his friends, his two friends that were with us. And the game wasn't on TV. Now, I want to make sure I say this. I never said anything to my dad about what was being done.
He has no idea.
No clue. No clue. He just knows, hey, his son's at the Board of Trade. His son's making a few bucks. His son likes to gamble. He's going to be out here for Super Bowl weekend. Now, did I think my dad didn't really pick up on a vibe where maybe he overheard something? My dad was not an idiot. Let's put it that way. He's a smart man, but he just didn't ask me. Yeah. It was kind of like, don't ask, don't tell. Don't ask, don't tell type of thing. Yeah. But never said it. So we're not even watching the game. We're watching the ticker come across. We're eating $1
so getting updates on scores a little bit, but it's
this is 1993. Technology is just jacked up. It's nowhere near where it is today. And so we're in the sports book at a high top table, the four of us, and I ordered a couple $1 hot dogs from the hot dog cart at Bally's, and I got 700,000 on this game. Yeah. And I'm watching the ticker go by. Like every 3-4 minutes, they show the Arizona State-Oregon State game. And, Pat, it was ugly. I mean, ASU was up by 20 in the first half. Yeah. I mean,
Stephen was having the game of his life, wasn't he?
18, 20, every update that came by, I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing? And then we had a ticker update come by where, hey, Stephen Headache Smith has had 20 points in the first half. And I'm saying, what? That's crazy.
Are you, at this point, are you thinking that he played you maybe? Or what are you thinking?
I didn't pay him anything yet.
Oh.
So I had never paid him anything. Yeah. I told him I'm going to pay him the day after he performs, right? So I'm thinking maybe there's pro scouts in the stadium, which there were. But he ended up scoring. I find out after the fact when I looked at the box score the next day. He scored 39 points. It was a career high for him.
Almost half of the team's points.
Yeah, career high. I mean, and I don't know how many three-pointers, but he just torched it that night, right? So he ended up having a really good night. And, the second half, I'd say right around the 15-minute mark of the second half, we're watching the ticker keep going by, and the lead starts really shrinking. You see 15, you see 12, you see 10, you see 8, and I'm like, wow, this is feeling great, right? Because the first half, my dad would say, Joey, what are you doing betting this kind of money on a game? The team's up by 20, And I'm trying to tell him, Dad, it's a long game. Be patient. We'll see what happens. Sure enough, the second half, things started happening. Now, I wish I would have been able to watch the game. It would have been great. Yeah. But I did get some feedback that night from Benny when I talked to him about what a masterful job Stephen did, just with some bad passes down the stretch, some turnovers. And, people don't really realize in point shaving or fixing a game, it's not about an offensive performance. So that's how Headache put up 39 points type of thing, right? And had a career offensive night. But what they don't understand is what he did on the defensive side of the ball.
Which is really where he
giving someone an extra couple feet on a jump shot, maybe not taking an angle the way he should have taken an angle on defense. Maybe bricking a few free throws down the stretch, whatever it needed to get done. But there were some turnovers too, which were really masterful. And after, obviously, not to break the storyline here at all, but obviously everyone knows I got indicted for this whole thing. Yep. But afterwards, you get to see a lot of the footage, the game footage, and you could see
You could see what he was doing.
Turnovers that were okay. Yeah. Isaac would run one way and Headache would pass the ball behind him, type of thing, and it'd be a turnover. But Pat, it went second half when I was watching that ticker, just euphoric and amazing. Now I wish I would have watched the game. I have since then, but it landed on 6. It landed on 6 at the end of the game. And
So how much did you make in that first game?
That first game, my dad and I ended up collecting a little over 1.1 million in Vegas in cash.
Wow.
And I say 1.1 because people can do the math and they're going to say, no, you can't bet 500,000 to get 1.1. Yeah, okay, well you can, because what I did, for me it's numbers. For me it's just numbers.
Yeah.
So rather than, if you understand this, and I'll try to give a quick little tutorial on the gambling side of it. If you're going to try to win 1,000 on a game, you got to bet 1,100. So I told you the 10% vig.
Yep.
However, if you bet parlays, if you bet 2-team parlays, you get 2.6 on your money. So for every 1,000 you bet, you're going to get back $2,600. Well, if you have one team that you know is going to win, and then you take two teams that are playing each other, and you take either side of that. So you key the one team with Oregon State in this case, and then you take the other two teams that are playing each other, and you take a parlay, take a $1,000 parlay with Team A and a $1,000 parlay with Team B. You can't lose. And instead of laying 10%, now I'm getting 1.3 on my money because I'm going to lose one side. Or the ideal scene is on the teams, on the other games that you're coupling the Oregon State with, you don't bet lines that have half a points on them. You bet lines that are even numbers. So then maybe you push, maybe that team, let's say you bet the Bulls and the Pacers and the Bulls are -6. You bet Oregon State and the Bulls, Oregon State and the Pacers -6. And if that Bulls and the Pacer game lands on 6, you're going to push on both sides.
Yep.
Now you're getting the straight returns on the monies on top of it, and you're not laying the vigs, and you're winning both sides. So that's how I got to about $1.1 million in Vegas in cash on game one. Plus, I had about 300,000 with different sports books back in Chicago. So
now after that game, you put 50,000 in an envelope to give to Headache, right?
Yeah. So I ended up calling Benny that night after the game, and I said, "Hey, I need you to book a flight first thing in the morning from Arizona to Vegas." He said, "Why? What's up?" I said, "I need to give you money." He said, "Okay." So he came, and my mentality was, I'm going to do Saturday's game bigger, better, and badder than I did Thursday's game.
Because now you know it's going to work.
Because now I know. But the only reason to get this kid, meaning Steven or Headache, or whichever one he was at that point, the only way to get him to make sure he performs is I want to get cash in his hand. Yeah. Because I'm looking, here's a
Poor kid from Dallas. That's
starving college kid from Dallas.
Eating ramen.
Was in the hole, gambling 10,000, had no way out. If I can get him $100,000 in cash, let him sleep on that. Let him sleep with it as his pillow over nighttime. Let him know that we're real on our side. You do what you need to do. We're real. The money's real on this side.
So you gave him the 50 for the game.
I gave him 50 for game one, and I gave him 50 for game two.
So you prepaid him for this.
Prepaid him for game two.
But you knew that if he's holding 100,000 cash, you might get him for more.
No, I knew I'd have him. I knew I'd have him to perform for game two because now I'm thinking, okay, now I'm sitting on $1 million plus in Vegas. I've got bookmaker credit. I'm thinking, how do I crush it even harder for game two? And, okay, so I need to make sure my superstar performs. How do I make sure my superstar performs? Let him fall in love with greed. Let him fall in love with cash. Let him sleep with it. Let him go shopping on Friday, whatever he wants to do. So I had Benny.
Isn't it interesting, though, Joe, that we found out 20 years later that that did work for him, but it actually, he got way less than we thought because – it was 20 years before you actually sit down with Steven face to face, and I was there. It was almost surreal. We are at that restaurant. We meet somewhere between Austin and Dallas, and you guys are sitting there telling each other the story. So you guys have both done prison time. You've done all this stuff, and you're meeting really for the first time. And then as you guys are talking, you tell Steven about when I gave that 100,000, and he's like, "What? I didn't get 100,000." So Benny was stealing off the top, right?
Benny, from what I heard from Steven, was Benny gave him 20,000 a game.
Yeah. So Benny took quite a bit for himself.
Took it all off the top.
So what did you make on your second game then?
Well, the second game, I took 100% of what I won on game one and rolled it into game two. So did some creative things with exotics on parlays and everything else. And, went home after game two, if we're talking about game 2, because I told Headache that day after shoot-around on Saturday, I told him the game had to land on 6. And, the same thing with the line. Oregon, Arizona State was playing Oregon, probably about 11.5, 12-point favorite, pretty much identical to the Oregon State game. And told them it had to land on 6 because I said, okay, I need a cushion. Somehow I need a cushion. And took everything I had, rolled it into game 2, did a lot of exotics, did everything else, and ended up going home with about $3 million.
Wow.
It landed right on 6, Pat.
So he did it twice.
It landed right on 6.
Twice.
Now,
it's just incredible.
Now you look at that should have been the dream weekend, right?
Yep.
Super Bowl weekend. You got a Thursday game, a Saturday game. You're under the radar. Nobody knows what's happening. You just made $3 million in cash on 2 games. I'm 23 years old. Then I bet the Super Bowl on Saturday. I think I put, I don't know what the number is. It's either 300,000 or 500,000 on the Dallas Cowboys, and the Dallas Cowboys ended up winning. I'm like, oh gosh! So I had all this cash.
So Thursday, Friday, Saturday,
and then
you bet these 3 games, and you just
Sunday was a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So I bet the Super Bowl on Sunday, and I win that as well. And I watched that game with my dad, the Super Bowl game, and it was just when I think the only benefit for the ASU things was the laughs and the memories that I had with my dad.
Yeah.
Because once again, my dad wasn't my co-conspirator.
Yeah.
My dad didn't realize what was going on.
Yeah.
No idea. He was just excited
He's
for
just
his
thinking
son.
you're winning big bets. Yeah.
And then I remember, we had so much cash, and I was playing blackjack, and we had, I was playing at this private table, and my dad was sitting right next to me, and Pat, I'm not one to brag about numbers or anything, but I was betting 500, 1,000, 2,000 a hand, and I got into some type of hot streak, right? And I had these purple $500 chips that were just stacked, and we had couple dozen people watching behind us, and it was just such a good memory for my dad and I.
Yeah.
And the laughs, and we were having a few drinks, and it was so that's the only positive I can take from these ASU events was just some good memories with my dad.
Well, and if you would have stopped there, if you and Steven and the rest of the people involved in this would have stopped there, almost a guarantee you would have gotten away with it.
If I would have stopped and Steven would have stopped, I believe that nothing would have came out of it. Because I know how I managed the money.
Yeah.
I know those lines didn't move sub 10.5 or 11 at any given point.
Yep.
I felt comfortable in how I was doing. What stymied the whole thing was when you look at guys like Benny and some of the other kids on campus that Benny told what was going on to.
Yeah.
So that's when game 3 rolls around at that point. And I thought we were done after game 2.
Yeah.
I thought we were completely done after game 2. I told Benny I was out. I didn't even tell Steven. I didn't even talk to him. And it was a couple weeks later, I'm at my apartment in Lincoln Park, and I get a phone call. And it's Steven. And it's the first time he's ever called me. And I'm shocked how he even got my number, right? But somehow he got my number. I don't know, from my brother, from Benny. I don't know how he got my number. And he tells me, Joe, I'm a senior. Hey, we're playing UCLA tomorrow. I've never beaten UCLA. In the 4 years we've been here, we've never beaten UCLA. At that point, UCLA was like the 3rd ranked team in the country.
Yeah, they were a good team. Yeah.
They had big George Zedek in the middle. They had Charles and Eddie O'Banion as forwards. They were just stacked. They were ranked 3 or 4 in the nation and just stacked. And so much so that UCLA was a 4-point favorite at ASU. So Steven calls me up and says, hey, we're playing UCLA tomorrow. Now, I had heard rumors from my brother. This was probably 3 weeks after the Oregon game, after game 2. I had heard rumors from my brother and from a few people that my brother had introduced me to that Headache was broke. He was spending money like a drunken sailor. I went out and bought a car and went out and bought a big medallion of diamonds with a basketball and earrings and clothes. And
definitely not hiding the fact that he came into money.
Definitely not hiding it. But, at that point, put yourself in his shoes. he's very confident he's going to be a first-round NBA draft
sign
pick
a multi-million
in June.
dollar contract. Yeah.
So now we're in February, and he's thinking 5 months later he's going to be drafted,
Yep.
and all of his cares are going to be out the door, and that's it. So he calls me up and said, "Hey, we've never beat UCLA. We're playing them tomorrow on our home court. I'd like to bet on myself." And I said, "Why don't you do that with Benny?" He said, "Benny doesn't want the action." He said, "I need your help." And I said, "How much do you want to win?" He said, "I want to win $20,000. So I thought about it for a second. And this is another one of my litanies of mistakes, I should say.
Yeah.
I looked at the line. I saw the line was 4. I said, "Okay, you got ASU plus 4 tomorrow night against UCLA for $22,000. I said, "Good luck." And I hung up the phone. Something triggered in me. We're saying, okay, I need to be there because I need to watch this for 2 reasons. I want to watch it just for personal curiosity because I want to see how this guy plays. Now he's motivated. Now I know I've heard rumblings that he's broke. And now he's got $20,000 that if he is broke, he doesn't have $20,000. And he knows, he doesn't know me, but he thinks he knows of me. So I'm going to see how this kid's going to play. And the second thing was, I looked at the calendar because it's the same thing with Oregon State and Oregon when they come to town.
Yeah.
You got UCLA and USC comes to town. And USC and UCLA, they flip-flop with U of A and they go back and forth. So the UCLA game was on a Thursday, and then the USC game was on a Saturday. So in the back of my mind, when I'm forecasting and looking ahead after the UCLA game, I said, well, if Headache loses this game, well, if he wins, I'm going to give him $20,000. I'm going to make a trip to Arizona. I'm going to visit my brother. And I think I'm going to be happy for this kid that he won $20,000. That was one way I was looking at it. The other way I was looking at it, well, if Headache loses, he doesn't have $22,000 to pay me. That I know. So why don't I just fly to Arizona, watch the game. I'll bring money with me. And then if he loses, by the way, the USC game is on Saturday. I'll get him to fix the USC game for me on Saturday, and I'll just fly right to Vegas from Arizona. That was my warped thinking.
This is another phone call you should have hung up. Yeah.
That seems to be the general theme of my life, right? So I get there. I actually fly there. I bring a duffel bag of $2.5 million. I fly out to Arizona State by myself. I got a duffel bag over my shoulder. I got $2.5 million. I scalp a ticket in the Wells Fargo parking lot, and I'm sitting maybe 7-8 rows off the floor with a duffel bag over my shoulder, watching by myself.
Do you have the duffel bag of cash in the arena? Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness.
I'm sitting there watching the UCLA ASU game. And Pat, it was probably one of the best basketball games I've ever watched in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, Arizona State, they were ahead a little bit. They were tied. They were ahead. They were down by a point or two, back and forth. And what I noticed was Steven just playing with such grit and passion, just carried that whole team on his back. And so literally he had Arizona State plus 4, and it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Under a minute to go, UCLA goes up by 2. Arizona State brings the ball down court. They miss. UCLA gets the ball back again. They ended up fouling UCLA, and Big George Zedek goes to the free throw line with like 3 seconds, 4 seconds left, whatever it was, and he makes both free throws. So now UCLA is up by 4. So there is not a 4-point field goal that could be scored at all. So UCLA is up by 4, 2 or 3 seconds on the clock, and the arena is pretty much quiet because at that point the home team's going to lose, right?
Yep.
But I distinctly hear, and I talked to Steven about this as well, distinctly hear Headache on the court yell to his teammate, "Give me the effing ball." And so really you watch this footage, and it's in the documentary as well.
Yep.
You watch this footage where literally, picture this if you could. You've got, Zedek just makes the second free throw. The benches all stand up. The coaches start to walk towards
game's over.
Coaches start to walk towards half court to do the congratulatory handshakes, right?
Yep.
Other 9 players on the courts are all like shaking, whatever. A good game, good sportsmanship, right? Headache yells, "Give me the effing ball." He's sprinting up court in a dribble, in a mad dribble, plants behind the 3-point line and fires a shot. And it rims out. It doesn't go in. And he drops to all four, like completely dejected. Completely dejected. Now, my eyeballs are saying, well, he's dejected because he just lost $22,000. Because that shot, even if it went in, they still lose the game by one.
Yeah.
It
But
doesn't.
he wins $22,000.
But he wins 20 grand at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's dejected because now he's saying, shoot, I'm back in the hole again. I owe these guys in Chicago $22,000. And oh, by the way, we just lost to the number 3 team in the nation. So that's what led to game 3.
Yeah.
Is now 1 and 2, we should have been done. I went home, I had $3 million, 23 years old, about to get married. I should have been on cloud 9. Everything was good, right? Game 3 was led because of Headache's personal bet on his own team against UCLA. So rather than him owing me $22,000, I called him up that night and I said, hey, here's another way you can get out of it. You got UCLA coming to town. Oh, you got USC coming to town on Saturday. Give me that game. He said, okay. So that's what led to game 3. Game 3 was emanated from him losing $22,000.
Yeah. So what was the total that you made after all these?
So game 3 then, so literally we watched the game 3 game itself in Las Vegas. I had bet $2.5 million in Vegas on game 3. And probably bet another $400,000 with sports books. Now, I don't even think game 3 needed to be fixed. I just think UCLA, maybe it was ASU having a letdown from the UCLA game a couple days earlier, or because Arizona State just came out flat. And the point guard for USC really had his way with Steven that day. He was a good kid, too. He was a good player, too. He ended up playing a little bit in the pros afterwards. But so I'm done with game 3, and I've got north of $5 million. I've got north of $5 million.
And that's how we kind of started this. That's when you had the $5 million in the duffel bag. The very first time I meet you, that's when you're telling me about that. And I'm like, you can't fit $5 million in a duffel bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would have been a good time to quit, too.
It would have, but at that point, the proverbial cat was already out of the bag. I mean, there were so many red flags on the betting line for the USC game as well, because I was in Vegas and trying not to move the numbers, trying not to fill out CTR reports, and you'd see a lot of kids with ASU sweatshirts on betting 20s and $100 bills like they knew the final score.
Yeah.
So the word was out. Benny had spilled the beans, and a lot of the college kids already knew what was going on at that point.
Yeah. So, Joe, let me ask you this. This is a good question. I actually read a question similar to this that was asked of Mike Tyson by Sports Illustrated one time. And they said, if your 22-year-old self, with him, they said 18. If your 18-year-old self was listening to this episode, in your case, 22-year-old self was listening to this episode, what truth would you tell him that he didn't want to hear back then that might have changed his thinking? What do you think you could say to 22-year-old Joe, 23-year-old Joe that would have caused you to hang up the phone?
As we're wrapping up this episode, be sure to leave us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment on something you'll take away. All right, let's hop back into the remainder of the episode.
Man, what would I have said that would have resonated?
Yeah.
Because that's the difference. You know, these kids, and I say these kids as a general type of synopsis, but it's hard to say something to a kid and have it resonate with them.
So true.
It's like when you talk to my son, he looks up to you. When I talk to my son, it's my dad's nagging me. My dad's just telling me something. It's who's the messaging coming from. So there's different thoughts. So,
which, by the way, really quick, because I'm going to let you finish, but you answered that very similar to how Mike Tyson did. I always loved his answer because he said to that Sports Illustrated interviewer, he goes, nothing I say would have resonated with that my 18-year-old self. I wouldn't listen to anybody, including myself from the future, which is interesting. But you're kind of making the point that it would have taken some work to have something said to 23-year-old Joe that would have resonated with you, that would have caused you to hang up. But do you think there's anything? Like if you would have said, I'm Joe from the future.
I would have told myself, but once again, the messaging was coming from myself. I probably would have been too stupid to listen. if the messaging would have came from someone like my dad or someone that really had mentorship in my life,
And
then
you
I would have
really
listened.
valued and respected, yeah.
But if I was my older self going back to my younger self and saying it, I would have basically honed in on there are no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Nothing good ever comes out of anything easy.
That's so good. Yeah. Well, and I love what you said about your dad too, though, Joe, that when you called him, if he would have said, Joe, what are you doing? Or he called you Joey, right? Joey, what are you doing? It would have shocked you into probably saying, like, what am I doing? Like he's the one that might have had that voice.
Well, I would hope so, or I might have been too pig-headed and too full of myself at that age because I was doing really well, and I was thinking I was invincible and thinking I knew where all the bodies were buried. And I might have just been too pig-headed myself to just – but I want to believe I would have listened to my dad.
Yeah.
I do.
Let me read you a couple of quotes from your book, No Gray Areas. Audience, we're going to do some free book giveaways, signed copies. So highly recommend getting this or trying to get one of these free copies signed by Joe. But this is right toward the end of the book. And now that the audience kind of heard this story, they're going to resonate with how powerful this is. You said the early life choices I made allowed me to wrongly think that gray areas were acceptable spaces to play in. At first, those simple gray areas seemed innocent enough. Over time, the decision I made, small grains of sand at the time, grew into mountains of pain and suffering with those moral mountains in front of me. It started these little decisions, like you're saying, these gray areas, and it turned into what you said, mountains of pain and suffering. And of course, if we fast forward in time, you ended up doing prison time. You guys ended up getting caught. It cost Steven his career, his pro career here, most likely. So you guys paid dearly for that. But what you said there, I think, is so important because, and that's really why you insist that the movie that we're in the process of making be called No Gray Areas, because that's your passion, right?
Just really want to make sure that the cautionary tale is told. So there are no shortcuts, Pat. And once you come to grips with compromising your integrity, where do you stop?
Yeah.
You know, maybe at first it's a little white lie. Then the white lie gets to be your norm because then you can't really just differentiate between the truth and between a lie. Or let's say you go shopping and you steal a pack of gum. You're like, okay, well, in theory, it's a $1 pack of gum. It's not a felony, but it's still you're compromising yourself. So that pack of gum turns into, ribeyes for your family one night, or turns into a car, or turns into thefts in some capacity.
Yep.
So it morphs into a body of its own at that point.
Yeah.
And that's where I was going with that thing. No matter, once you compromise your integrity, it's a slippery slope. It just doesn't end.
Let me read you another quote from this. And I know you remember these because you typed these on an old-fashioned typewriter in prison, right? That's when you wrote this. So
exactly
audience,
right.
I want you to hear that and understand that. That's such a cool thing. So I can just picture you in your dark little cell with this old-fashioned typewriter,
with no correction tape either.
Yeah.
So I'm so flipping anal that I'd get to the bottom of the page and I'd type a wrong key. I'd have to retype the whole page over.
You would start all over? Yeah. Well, here's what you write. Again, this is right near the end of the book. You say, any choice we make needs to be solely based on whether it's right or wrong. Your choice must please an audience of one. You must be able to stand proud of your decision. What do you mean when you say your choice must please an audience of one?
It's my own personal litmus test, so to speak. Obviously you and I are of faith, and I lean on you quite a bit, you being the one that never graduated from Bible college.
You love to bring that up, don't you?
I love to bring it up, yeah.
Yes. But still always learning.
But you came close, though.
Yes.
You went to Moody's, and obviously you're just wickedly intelligent with Bible and scriptures, and I lean on you often for advice, just like my family does as well. But, faith is the focus, the foundation that myself and my family stand on. Goes along with our foundation as well, Operation Joy. Joy being an acronym for Jesus, others, and you. So faith is really important to me. So when I say it's my litmus test, audience of one, I stopped trying to perform for others. I stopped trying to live under this BS perception where I need to be the big shot or I need to, wow other people and have a bigger house and nicer things and everything else, and saying, you know what, are my actions pleasing my audience of one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know who my audience of one is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for someone else, they might not align with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Whatever your audience of one is, maybe it's your mom, maybe
Yeah,
it's your dad,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it's a mentor, maybe it's
Yeah.
someone you look up to. If your actions can be compliant and pleasing to them,
Mm-hmm.
that should be your baseline of how you conduct yourself.
I think, Joe, the reason that I love that quote so much, and I think it's so important, and I hope our audience gets this, it's maybe one of the single most important lessons that we can learn, and we'll probably spend our whole life trying to learn, because most of us at some level become people pleasers. Depending on your personality, maybe
Yeah.
different. But we end up trying to, in junior high and high school, you're trying to get your friends to like you, and it's the peer pressure and everything. But if we can get to the point in our life where we do what you say here at the end of the book, where we truly go like, it's the audience of one for me. And if you're a person of faith, most of our listeners are people of faith, but if you're a person of faith, that's probably God. There's no way we can even imagine the positive impacts that's going to have in your life.
At the end of the day, that's the only gauge that we can gauge ourselves.
Absolutely.
I can't even gauge myself on you anymore because you're just as jacked up as I am.
Exactly.
That text you gave me last night with you yelling at some customer service lady that didn't ship your electronics the right way.
It's true.
And so I can't even go to you anymore by saying, okay, give me the voice of reason, be my barometer.
Yes.
You're not even my barometer anymore. So
Well, for the audience, so they know, it was one of those situations. I spent about an hour and a half on the phone talking to someone from another country that didn't understand English. By the end of it, I was so frustrated and angry. And yes, I texted you and I said, hey, just so you know, I'm jacked up too. I had to spend some time confessing to my wife and God because I just lost it. Yeah. So, Joe, what would you say as we kind of wrap this up? Like this place in your life, you said you're 57.
Yeah.
What would you say, first of all, to people who are maybe listening to this and have made a decision in their past? Because a lot of us have. You did prison time for years. Most of us didn't get caught and haven't done prison.
Yeah.
But they can't get over that mistake they made. What have you done in your life that help you move beyond that? You never get beyond it completely because you have to you live with the felony title. Like that's just
carrying that label of a convicted felon is absolutely brutal.
Oh, it sucks.
It's brutal. And they talk about trying to rehabilitate and everything. The system just doesn't allow it.
Man.
The system doesn't allow it. And believe me, the last thing I ever want to do is play victim.
Yeah.
That's just not what I'm trying to do, not how I'm wired. But you say, what would I say is that there are no shortcuts. There is no easy way. There is no gray area. There are no gray areas. When you look at things in life, there is either right or wrong, or there's black or white.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start convincing yourself that something is acceptable, that's going to become your norm.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I would caution people to stay away from. We're all products of our environment. We're all products of the consequences of our life choices. And so that's what we're doing, and that's what you guys have done so well with building out this platform, is we realize that choices have consequences.
Yeah.
And you're the one that's in control of your choices. So you're going to control the end consequences that come along with it.
Which is why that's kind of the theme of this podcast, right? We the power and complexity of human choice, that we make our choices and eventually our choices make us. And that's your story.
Yeah.
But your choices and your wrong choices that you made when you were younger, it's not the finished story though. And that's what I love about your story, Joe. You are impacting people.
It's not the finished story, Pat, because we're all jacked up.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that all the time. We're all jacked up. We're flawed. Information age is just deadly. You know that as well as I do.
Yeah.
I mean, people Google me, they see convicted felon, they see stuff, and fine, whatever. But that's their perception of what I'm about. Now I know, and it's taken me time. In a lot of different ways in my warped mind to sort through some things that I know I'm not that person. And so I'm okay with that. What I have found and where I find solace, so to speak, is the ones that want to pass judgment, or the ones that want to play this holier-than-thou BS game that they want to play, are more than likely the ones with more skeletons in their own closet.
Absolutely.
I say this, Pat, and you know me well enough. I don't think there's a secret that I have kept from you, and you're involved in everything we're doing as a family, everything we're doing business-wise. It's people's perception of what reality is really sometimes very deflating.
Yeah.
Because you can't outlive, I can't outlive what happened. Every business deal we do, every time we go to get insurance, whether it's banks or whatever it is, they pull up this report and, it's out there.
Yep.
But so when I say the ones that claim holier than thou have more skeletons in their own closet, I truly believe that.
Yeah.
My skeletons are painfully written inside that 250-page book.
Yeah.
I didn't leave anything out.
Yeah.
I put dirt in there. I put things that I'm not proud of. I put things that I wish I could take back and wish I could change. The only thing I didn't put was personal things that pertain to my relationships with people I love.
Yeah.
My relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids. I didn't put, but any choice that I made myself is in that book.
Yeah.
So, what I'm proud of is my skeletons are out there.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to smear me or persecute me and hold me fully accountable for what they think I'm about because of what happened in 1993, 94, that's great.
Yeah.
But let me probe into your kitchen. Let me see how clean that kitchen is.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you there'll be more mess than my mess. My mess is out there for the public to see.
Yeah. And we've talked about that numerous times, the two of us, and I think you're right. Well, Joe, man, thank you so much, and I would really encourage our audience. No Gray Areas, great book. We got a movie coming out that we're working on, right? I can't wait for
process.
that. It's been a long process, but love the script. Documentary, if they haven't seen that, they got to go to Netflix and watch that Bad Sport documentary. We're going to do a book giveaway, like we said. Any last words before we go?
No, I'm just super thankful for what you're doing. Thankful to have you in my life, Riley and Peyton, what they're doing, and the whole No Gray Areas team. And hopefully we just keep effectuating change.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I honor you for caring so much about making a difference and doing things like the foundation, like this podcast, like the book, like the movie, where you really are trying to do that. So I appreciate it. And
thank you, brother.
Love you, brother.
Thanks for tuning into this special anniversary episode with Joe and I. We've had the privilege of recording over 120 episodes since the podcast began, and we're so appreciative of our listeners. Be sure to send this episode to someone and subscribe to the No Gray Areas podcast on YouTube to never miss an episode. We'll see you next time here at No Gray Areas.